Hey guys, how's it going? All right, you've probably seen this chart many times. I share it. Uh, Bitcoin on the 2 week time frame with the TBQ indicator and the cost of production for Bitcoin. Now, these are incredible indicators. Zooming out and looking at this in a macro perspective. And I think it's important for us to continue to remind ourselves to do this. It's important. We got to get out of the 1 hour charts and the 1 day charts every now and again and just get a good picture of where we are and where we're headed. And I think these indicators on this chart time frame helps us to do that because we can see very clearly that once we have a print of the green dollar sign, we reach down here in the cost of production purple ribbon. These are accumulation zones, guys. Historically, they've always been accumulation zones, and that's currently where we are now. Can we break down and go a little bit below? Sure. Do you want to wait for that to happen? It doesn't happen every time, right? Do you want to wait for it to break down? Well, it might not happen. And then you miss that opportunity, the same as many people miss this opportunity, the same as many people miss this opportunity because of fear. And it's just history happening again. So, what I think is going to happen, and I don't know, I could be wrong, but just looking at the data, doing my best to interpret the data, looking what happened historically, I'm just going to zoom in for a moment here on the daily. And it looks to me like what we're seeing. Let me put a few lines on here. Let me put it on the 3 day. To me, it looks like we're seeing something like this play out. And I think there's a good chance, again, I don't know, I don't see the future, but looking at what has happened historically and the patterns, it looks to me like we could be seeing a double bottom here play out. If this breaks, we see a double bottom. If we're not going to see a double bottom, then it's obvious we're going to have to break and hold this trend line before we move higher. My base case is we break and we visit the low 60s again. Maybe we see something like this and we get a wick down there and we start moving. Maybe we see something like that. In any case, is this, whoops, let me get rid of that big scary red. Let me get rid of this and let me fix this up the way that I want it. Is this not accumulation zone? Whether you're buying here, whether you're buying here or here, or you put in a limit purchase order, and you buy and you get this wick. Maybe your central exchange doesn't have that wick because it just doesn't happen all the time. You could get a big drawdown uh, in Binance, but you don't see the same thing on MEXC. Is this not is this entire range not a buy range, not an accumulation range? Well, let's once again zoom out. Right? Is this not a good accumulation range? The same as was this, the same as this, and this, and this down here. Yes, these are accumulation zones. So that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm doing. Um, I'm going to be accumulating here. I might do some later today, as a matter of fact. Pick up some Bitcoin because that's what I'm currently looking at. Because, as I've mentioned before, my last video, and I'm not going to do the exact same this video. I just want to talk about this quickly. If we do see this, and I think we will, and I'm basing my strategy on what my base case is, of course. I think we will see this. I could be wrong. You might have a different strategy than me, and that's okay. But if we do see this and Bitcoin falls from where it is currently another 10% or so, then we could see Tau revisit down here, and that's accumulation zone for me. We could see Render revisit this trend line. That's accumulation for me. And we could see Hype come back and touch this trend line, maybe even go a little bit deeper, depending on uh, how deep Bitcoin goes and how long it stays down. Now, Hyperlink, I don't know, maybe I said Tau. Hyperlink has been outperforming Bitcoin. It's been doing incredible. So, but it is due for a correction. How far does it go? Maybe it goes 20% down, retouches that trend line. Maybe some others go down 50%. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just trying to look at the charts, read them, and try to come up with what I think is most probable, and then work with that. That's all we can do, right? Since we don't have a crystal ball, we can't see the future. We just have to do our best with interpreting the charts, right? Maybe we go down another 10, 13%, and then that is, for me, a good spot to start picking up some more, or some. I don't have any right now. Hype. Okay. Maybe we come back and retest this support here. Anyways, that's what I'm watching in Bitcoin. Just wanted to zoom out even further and look at some macro stuff. Something obviously that I'm watching is the US ISM, manufacturing new orders. Okay, this is the business cycle. Look at what we have here. A slow, methodical up and down, staircasing. It's been painful. Whereas past cycles, it's just been bam to the top, boom to the top, pow to the top. It hasn't been this drawn out as we're seeing this cycle. And it's painful. And a lot of people don't understand what's going on. And I don't know exactly what's going on. Nobody phoned me up and told me. I'm just doing my best to try to understand it by looking at the charts and trying to reason my way through it. Um, what makes sense to me is what happened in COVID hadn't happened in Bitcoin's history. We didn't have a global pandemic, a massive crisis where the United States printed, I don't even know how many trillions of dollars. I'd have to research that. I checked it up once before, but I don't want to say, I don't want to misquote. But trillions and trillions of dollars, which they haven't done before in such a short period of time, stimulate the economy and at the same time drop rates to virtually zero. And then what happened was because of all that stimulus, because of rates being so low for so long, They got crazy inflation. Inflation went to, I think, like, let's take a quick look here. Okay, there it is. So we can see that the United States inflation shot up, right? During COVID, shot up to over 9%, which is insane. Okay. So what did they have to do? They had to jump in. Let me reset this here. I was looking at something. What did they have to do? They had to jump in and combat inflation and start raising rates. And what happened once their forward guidance, let me close this for a moment. Once they came out with their forward guidance saying, okay, we're going to have to start raising rates soon. Inflation's getting out of control, right? Let's take a look here. Inflation peaked in May 2022, right? Inflation's going crazy. Inflation's going crazy. They're seeing it go crazy. They come out and they say, okay, we're going to have to start pivoting on rates, federal funds rates over here, Bitcoin. The markets get scared. They know exactly what happens when they start to raise rates. Markets start to fall off. They start raising rates. And what do they do? Zooming in here, we can see very clearly in the entire history of Bitcoin, they raised rates from virtually 0% to 5 almost 5.4, 5.36, 5.35% over the course of, I think it was 18 months or something like that. Let's see here. Yeah, over the course of about 18 months, which is really really high, really fast. Bitcoin cycles are have been basically used to 0% rates. And then once start rates um, started to get pretty high, like look over here, we peaked out when rates were at not even 1.4%. We rolled over, and then rates kept going up, and then they said, "Oh, we're gonna roll over. We're gonna start easing," and then Bitcoin started to do pretty well. 0% rates, they took off. We're not gonna see 0% rates. Uh, I don't think. I just don't think that's gonna happen. But if we can get rates down to somewhere that's reasonable in the twos, then people start spending money again. Money's cheap enough to start considering it. The issue is, I've spoken about this before, is rates were basically 0% and a lot of people started borrowing money. In order to entice them to get a new mortgage out on their house, to refinance, or even to sell their current house and give up their current mortgage rate, it's got to be worth it because they're locked in at, well, it was 0% here, so their mortgage rate is probably between 2.5, 3.5%. Um, so we need to see mortgage rates. We need to see the overnight rate come down quite a bit still. So that's why we've been seeing, in my opinion, this slow and steady rise because we've been seeing a slow and steady drop in interest rates. And that mirrors basically what we've been seeing over here in the business cycle, a slow and steady climb. I was looking at this, looking for similar patterns historically that we can try to compare to have an idea of maybe what we can expect. And I had to go back to the early 80s to see anything similar. And here is a slow and steady after a sharp spike and a sharp decline, similar to what we saw with COVID. And this was a slow, steady rise through expansion. We had a slow, steady rise starting a lot lower through the contraction phase of the market. And even though it was in the contraction phase of the market, Bitcoin still did pretty all right. Now we're sitting here at 55. Our highest this cycle was 56. If we go to that same period, we can see where we are right now, and it's early cycle, early business cycle. So obviously, Bitcoin wasn't around in the early mid 80s. So what we can do is we can take a look at what happened with the S&P 500 in that same time period. And if we look back to where we are currently in the business cycle, we had this slow, steady grind. Now we're finally the first time hitting 56, 57. This is where we were here. And we still had all this to go in the S&P 500, this massive run before we had a big correction. Are we going to see something similar to that? I don't know, maybe, right? We had a cycle here in the S&P 500. We had a correction. And then we had this slow, steady grind similar to what we're seeing now. And then we had a correction similar to what we've seen right now. Now we're sitting at this same spot on the business cycle, in ISM new orders. After a rollover, do we see this massive run as the business cycle continues to play out? If we look over here from where we are currently to where it actually peaks and rolls over, that's 2 years. Are we going to see a 2 year run that has its peaks and its valleys, of course? It's not impossible. We've seen it before in the S&P 500. Do we see it again? Do we see this slow grind turn into a coiled spring that unleashes over the next couple years? Sure would be fun. I don't know. We're used to this. Look, we're used to 4 years, 4 years, business cycle, um, post great financial crisis. But there's a lot of history before that, and things have played out differently before that, and it's going to catch a lot of people offside if that happens. And then look here, we had um, another beginning of a business cycle after this crash. Bloop. And what happened here? This was the .com era. Look at this. And it was from basically the entire 90s, from 1990 all the way to 2000. 10 years of rip and roar. Are we going to see something similar to that because of AI? I think it's very possible. Could even possibly be bigger because we've got AI, we've got energy, we've got so many different catalysts than we had back here for the .com boom. So we'll see how it's gonna play out. Um, so based on this information, it really seems that we're more early business cycle than we are late business cycle. Um, we still have the rest of this to play out. How long is it going to take to play out? I don't know. How is it going to go? I don't know. We'll see. Uh, some other things that we can take a look at really quickly is more Bitcoin focused rather than macro cycle focused. Just looking over here at blockchain decoded Bitcoin heat meter, um, look where we're sitting right now. I'm going to turn off the tooltip. So look where we're sitting right now. We're sitting in the same zone as we were for this mid-cycle correction and this mid-cycle correction. We're sitting right in the same area. We had a good pump, just hit the orange, and then we had a correction. We had a good pump, we came back, we hit the orange, we came back, had a good correction. So we're basically right here. We started to turn around, all of a sudden COVID hit. It drew us a little bit further. Maybe if we have another COVID-like event, it'll draw us further down, but that's not something that you can plan. That's not something you can count on. So and like I said, this has taken a lot longer. It's been following basically the business cycle peaks and valleys the same way as what's been going on over in the business cycle. Let me get rid of this here. You can see that every peak has been lining up with the Bitcoin peaks. Let me throw Bitcoin on here real quick. Right. Actually, I have it. I have it over here. I think. Yeah, I have Bitcoin over here. So you can see every peak was a peak. Every valley was a valley. Every peak was a peak. Valley was a valley. So this is telling me like we didn't get crazy overheated the same as we did in every other bull run. Bitcoin heat meter showing me mid-cycle correction. We can take a look over at the risk wave. Same thing, showing us mid-cycle correction. We didn't get overheated. We never went over 80%, showing us mid-cycle correction. We can also take a look over here at the Pule multiple. Same thing. These have always been accumulation areas um, historically. All right, guys, that's what I'm seeing. That's what I am planning, and that is why. So I'm keeping an eye out for this double bottom to form, as we have seen many times play out in this purple ribbon in the cost of production area. And when it does, I'm going to start picking up Bitcoin, and then I'm going to take a look at some of my favorite alts if they make it back down into these areas. If and once they do, then that's when I'm going to start picking up some Tau, some Render, and some Hype. All right, guys, that's it. Let me know what you guys think, what you're waiting for, what you're watching for, what signals you're paying attention to, and catch you guys on the next one.